In the darkest shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read ancient tomes, the order of the Abercast. We are the brave and bold.
Stigmata Studios presents The Jinn Jihad. The Jinn Jihad kicks your face with myths, mysteries, epic battles, suicide bombers, quirky characters, and divine power armor. In this epic graphic novel, the warrior archangels descend on a city in chaos. It's all-out war. The non-standard assembly battles an ancient terrorist organization and their ultimate weapon, the corrupted, magically enhanced, unstoppable monster, the Jinn. This graphic novel is a wild ride. It's one part distant Arab myth, one part Old Testament angelic vengeance, and one part unique heroic tough guys. Available on Amazon. Get more info on the Jinn Jihad and other titles at stigmatastudios.com.
I saw too at Byblos a large temple, sacred to the Bybloan Aphrodite. This is the scene and the scene of the secret rites of Adonis. I mastered these. They sent that the legend about Adonis and the wild boar is true, and that the facts occurred in their country. In a memory of this calamity, they beat their breasts and wail every year and perform their secret ritual amid signs of mourning through the whole countryside. When they have finished their mourning and wailing, they sacrifice in the first place to Adonis as to one who has departed this life. After this, they allege that he is alive again and exhibit his effigy to the sky. They proceed to shave their heads, too, like the Egyptians on the loss of their Apis. The woman who refuses to be shaved have to submit to the following penalty: to stand for the space for an entire day in readiness to expose their persons for hire. The place of hire is open, and none but foreigners. And out of these proceeds of the traffic of these women are a sacrifice to Aphrodite is paid. Some of the inhabitants of Byblos maintain that the Egyptian Osiris is buried in their town, and the public mourning and secret rites are performed in memory not of Adonis but of Osiris. I will tell you why this story seems worthy of credence. A human head comes every year from Egypt to Byblos, floating on its 7 days' journey thence. The winds by some divine instinct waft in its way. It never varies from its course, but goes straight to Byblos. The whole occurrence is miraculous. It occurs every year. And it came to pass while I was myself in Byblos and saw the head in that city. There is, too, another marvelous portent to the region of the Babylons. A river flowing from Mount Libanus discharges itself into the city, and this river bears the name of Adonis. Every year, regularly, it is tinged with blood and loses its proper color before it falls into the sea. It dyes the sea to a large space red, and thus announces their time of mourning to the Biblians. Their story is that during these days Adonis is wounded, and that the river's nature is changed by the blood, which flows into its waters, and that it takes the name from this blood. Such is the legendary vulgarity accepted, but a man of Byblos, who seems to me to be telling the truth, told me another reason for this marvelous change. He spoke as follows. The river, my friend and guest, passes through the Libanus. Now the Libanus abounds in red earth. The violent winds which blow regularly on those days bring down into the river a quantity of earth resembling vermilion. It is this earth that turns the river red, and thus the change in the river's color is due not to blood, as they affirm, but to the nature of the soil. It is this story, the Biblian, but even assuming that he spoke the truth, yet certainly seems to me something supernatural in the regular coincidence of the wind and the coloring of the river. This is from a book called The Syrian Goddess, or Dea Syria, by Lucian of Samasata, by Herbert Strong and John Garstang. So let's fucking do this. Are you ready? Are you ready? You ready to do this? You ready to weep, motherfucker? You want to weep for Tammuz, bitch? My mother told me when we were young, we're born superstars. You'll go far. Put your paws up, baby. You were born this way, and you were born in this way. We were born this way. Oh, hey. Check.
The Abercast. Occult. History. Conspiracy. Violence.
Yeah, baby, talk to me. All right, welcome to the Abercast. I'm John. I don't know what I did or said around my phone, but every day now in my YouTube feed, I get these videos about why it's homophobic to not date trans women. It's like, how many of these videos are out there? I get a new one every day. So I don't know. I guess it's telling something about me. Maybe I was talking about, I don't know. maybe I was talking about the baffle me too close to fucking my big brother telephone. All right, anyhow, I'm John. This is the Abercast. Please remember to rate and review on iTunes. I'd like to encourage everyone to check out my Patreon. I'm trying to get a Books for Soldiers program going on, so help me make America weird again. Check out the website, stigmatastudios.com or abercast.com. Check out the website. You can find my social media links at the bottom. I love it. I love talking to you guys. So find it. I helped a listener do some research on Masons. He contacted me about the bloodline of Cain, or the line of Cain episode. So I helped point him to some research tools, and also reach out another guy I spoke to almost all on and off all day a few weeks ago about another. That one was about Masons too. Maybe I should do another fucking Mason episode. All right, so this is a part 2 to it's kind of like a part 2. It's a revisiting of something that we did way back in the beginning called Those Who Weep for Tammuz. Now, when I did Moving Day, remember, not all the episodes made the cut. And unfortunately, those who weep for Tammuz did not make the cut. And it kind of broke my heart. I wanted to revisit it and to kind of put it back out there somehow, but I have this thing to, like, when an episode's done, I don't like to get in there and fuck around with it. I do very little editing. So I didn't want to get in there. One of the reasons it didn't make the cut is because it's only like 34 minutes long. Like I basically did not have enough time to fill the whole hour that I like to. Hour plus, around an hour, whatever. So it didn't make the cut. And I feel bad because I always put a pin in it, and I always wanted to go back and get it because I find more and more fascinating stuff about this story all the time. So I thought I would revisit it. It is available on Patreon, I think, for a very minimal donation. But just to, I'm always saying that I'm a completist. So I think just to be complete, no matter how long this episode is, I think I might tag those who weep for Tammuz at the back of this episode. So this episode is going to be way longer than it normally is, by like 34 fucking minutes. So maybe I'll do that. You will know before I will at this point. By now you've looked at the counter and you've done the math. So, but I'm doing this weeks in advance. I might not even remember to do it when we get to there anyhow. Whatever. If you're that driven, it's on Patreon. If not, I'm sure I'll remember to put it on the back of the episode. So just get through all of the ads in the back and get through the Soda Jerks fucking fight, and I'll tag it back there. It'll be 34 bonus minutes for those of you who didn't catch it before moving day. So I'm excited about that. I love having bonus stuff. And for those of you who don't listen all the way through, there's sometimes fun stuff at the end anyways. All right, so we're going to be talking, and I'm going to try not to make this as confusing as it could possibly be, but we're talking about Nimrod, Syrian, and Tammuz. However, like any of these stories that goes back this far into antiquity, and it depends on what version you're looking at and what version you're reading, the names change. This is, Joseph Campbell will tell you, this is the reason for archetypes and whatnot. So, various spaces. Tammuz, who's going to be the main character for this evening, is called Addis, and sometimes he's called Adonis. And this is funny because we've been reading Crowley, and he talks about Adonai, and you get down and you get to these root words, and it gets fun that way. So I've mentioned those who weep for Tammuz and the ways you can find it. Other episodes that you might want to check out if you're interested in this topic is the Nimrod and the Tower of Babel episode, which seems to come up a lot lately. The World War Z and Adam's Magic Wonderpants episode. Underpants, not Magic Wonderpants. They're magic underpants, so we'll just call them Wonderpants. Adam's Wonderpants. Anyhow, so there is those episodes, and a lot of the Masonic episodes get into this Osiris deluge, pre-deluge topics that we're going to wind up getting into. Zeitgeist. So I'm sure everyone's seen this movie or parts of it at any given time, but this thing that Zeitgeist did, where it has the religion portion at the beginning, talking about the solar deity, the solar myth. Ever since then, this story's been popping up. So you'll see the numerous, YouTube videos and Facebook memes and so forth, just hammering the idea that Adonis or Addis or Tammuz is one of these proto-Christ figures. You'll find videos that are like, The reason for Easter is because of this character, Syrian, who's also known as Estar or Estare or even Astara. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong at all. I'm just saying that it's interesting and... these videos will talk about, hours and hours of these YouTube videos will be explaining that Easter is a pagan holiday. And that's why we have bunnies and eggs, and it's like they belabor the bunny and egg thing, back to Astara, basically the Syriamis figure. And its roots in this story that we're going to be talking about of Tammuz. Ishtar, Astara is also known as the Queen of Heaven, which will be in tonight's story. So the thing that's important though that you need when you have one of these, every good Easter story. You know what every good Easter story needs? It needs one thing. Oh no, every good Easter story needs two things. Well, it's a story of the dying and rising God, right? So, these stories are everywhere in these ancient myths, or are they? Because the two things that you need for a dying and rising story, God story, the two things that you need for an Easter story is a God that dies and then that God rises again. A resurrection, So let's see if we can find one, or let's see if we can find this dying and this. We can find the dying for sure. Let's see if we can find the resurrection in the story of Tammuz. Let's see if we can find it. We got some old books that we're going to get into, but I want to start here at the. We need to check this in our Bible. We need to check it in our Bible. We need to search. We need to seek out the word of the Almighty God. But before we do this, I want you guys to do the spell. I want you guys to do the formula. I want you to fuck it. We're talking about dying and resurrecting gods tonight. We're talking about descent into hell. So you can have a dirty glass this evening, a dirty mason jar. Mix up your gin jihad in there. It's, you know what it is. It's your formula for mass distraction. And we're going to zip right in here to Ezekiel 8:12. Hold on. Speaking of gin jihad. Oh boy, this is going to be a long episode. Okay. He said to me, Son of man, you have seen what the elders of the house of Israel are doing in the darkness, each at the shrine of his own idol. They say the Lord does not see us. The Lord has forsaken the land. Again, he has said, you will see them doing things that are even more detestable. Then he brought me into the entrance of the north gate of the house of the Lord, and I saw women sitting there mourning for Tammuz. He said to me, do you see this, son of man? You will see things that are even more detestable than this. And so you're like, what the fuck are you talking about? So this is Ezekiel. He's visiting a church, and this is one of the many times that the Israelites start backsliding into older religions than their worship of Jehovah or the Tetragrammaton. And what he's pointing out here is that they're backsliding, and this next Ezekiel 8:16 explains that what they're doing is they've lapsed into sun worship. He brought me into the house of the inner court of the house of the Lord, and there at the entrance to the temple between the portico and the altar there are 25 men with their backs towards the temple of the Lord and their faces towards the east. They were bowing down to the sun in the east. So So here we go. We are launching. And remember, the thing that I want you guys to keep remembering is that Adonis, Addis, and Tammuz are all basically interchangeable for this story. I'm not saying that's across the board, whatever. I'm just saying for the story we're getting into tonight. So you can see the Israelites they've lapsed into, instead of worshiping Jehovah, they are worshiping the sun god, who is Adonis. So we understand that. So you will see things even more detestable. So let's remember that. Hold on, Now we're going to jump into this book called The Myths of Babylon and Assyria by this guy named Donald Mackenzie. This is from 1915. And this is the majority of our story. Among the gods of Babylonia, none achieved wider and more enduring fame than Tammuz, who was loved by Ishtar, the amorous queen of heaven, the beautiful youth who died and was mourned for and came back to life again. It does not figure by this popular name in any of the city's pantheons, but from the earliest times of which we have knowledge until the passing of the Babylonian civilization, he played a prominent part in the religious life of the people. So I really didn't set this up good. So this is editorializing by Donald Mackenzie. We haven't gotten into the story yet. So Donald Mackenzie claims right here that Tammuz died and came back to life. But let's get into the story. I don't think we're getting into the story yet. We still have more of this Mackenzie character. Tammuz, like the son of Egypt, was an agricultural deity. And was the this is all super interesting, by the way. I never put this together. And was the Babylonian harvest, was the gift of the rivers. It is probable that one of his several forms was, Demuzai Ebzu, Tammuz of the abyss. He was also the child, the heroic lord, the sentinel, the healer, and the patriarch who reigned over the early Babylonians for a considerable period. Tammuz of the Abyss was one of the members of the family Ea, god of the deep, whose other sons, in addition to Merodach, were Nera, an obscure deity, Kai Gula, the destroyer. Oh, sorry, hold on. I started to talk about Galactus. Okay. An obscure deity, Kai Gula, world destroyer. Brunutu Sa, broad ear. Kia Dim Azaga, child of renowned spirit. She may have been identical with Bilet Sheri, who was referred to in Sumerian hymns as the sister of Tammuz. The family group was character as a patriarch. No, the family group was probably formed by... I need to lay off this gin. The family group was probably formed by symbolizing the attributes of Ea and the spouse Demkina. Tammuz, in his character as patriarch, may have been regarded as a hostage from the gods, the human form of Ea who instructed mankind like King Osiris how to grow corn and cultivate fruit trees. As the youth who perished annually, he was the corn spirit. He is referred to in the Bible by his Babylonian name. When Ezekiel detailed the various idolatrous practice of the Israelites, which included the worship of the sun, and, quote, from every form, creeping things, and abominable beasts, unquote, a section of a composite monsters of Babylonia, he was brought to the door of the gate of the Lord's house, which was towards the north, and behold, there sat women weeping for Tammuz. The weeping ceremony is connected with the agricultural rites. Corn deities were weeping deities. They shed fertilizing tears, and the sowers simulated the sorrow of divine mourners. When they cast the seed in the soil to die, so that it might spring up as corn. The ancient customs, like many others, contributed to the poetic imagery of the Bible. They that sow tears, David sang, shall reap in joy. He that goeth forth was weeping, bearing precious seed. Okay, I'm sorry for that. I tried. Shall doubtless come again with rejoicing, bringing his sheaves with him. The Egyptian priestess who acted as part of the Isis and Nephthys mourned for the slain corn god Osiris. Gods and men before the face of the gods are weeping for thee at the same time. When they behold me, all thy sisters goddesses are at their side by the couch, calling upon thee with weeping, yet thou art prostrate upon my bed. Oh yeah. Live before us and desiring to behold thee. It was believed to be essential human beings should share the universal sorrow caused by the death of a god. If they remained unsympathetic, the deities would punish them as enemies. Worshippers of nature gods therefore based their ceremonial practice on a natural phenomenon. The dread of the worshippers that the neglect of the usual ritual would be followed by disaster is particularly intelligible, writes Professor Robertson Smith. If they regarded the necessary operation of agriculture as involving the violent extinction of a particle of divine life, by observing their ritual, the worshippers won the sympathy and cooperation of deities, or exercised a magical control over nature. The Babylonian myth of Tammuz, the dying god, bears a close resemblance to the Greek myth of Adonis, who also links with the myth of Osiris. So we're talking all about these sun gods, as Ezekiel points out. According to Professor Sayus, Tammuz is identical with Dionysus or Deus, the shepherd Pantibla, referred to by boy, this is an obstacle course, as the ruler of one of the mythical ages of Babylonia. We have therefore to deal with Tammuz in this twofold character as a patriarch and a god of fertility. The Adonis version of the myth may be summarized briefly. Ere the god was born, his mother, who was pursued by her angry sire, and the river goddess of the folk tales are pursued by the well demons, transformed herself into a tree. We'll see trees over and over again in these sun myths, these sun god myths. Remember, Osiris was stuck under a tree in his dead form. It's interesting. Yggdrasil. Okay, anyhow. Adonis sprang from the trunk of this tree, and Aphrodite, having placed a child in a chest. Oh, here we go. Moses committed him to the care of Persephone, the queen of Hades, who resembled the Babylonian Eresh-Ka-Gal. Persephone desired to retain the young god, and Aphrodite, or Ishtar, appealed to Zeus, or Anu, who decreed that Adonis should spend part of the year with one goddess and part of the year with the other. It is suggested that the myth of Adonis was derived by a post-Homeric times by the Greek indirectly from Babylonia, though the Western Semites, the Semitic title Adon, meaning Lord. Remember, this is Adonai again. That Crowley uses, meaning Lord, having been mistaken for a proper name. This theory, however, cannot be accepted without qualifications. It does not explain the existence. I don't know why I included this. Hold on. Oh, okay, this is why. Was developed differently from the Tammuz myth, the Celtic story of Dimred and the boar, which belonged to the archaeological hunting period. There are traces in Greek mythology of pre-Hellenic myths about dying harvest deities. So I kept this in because the cold open we talked about, we linked the boar mauling the guy that died, whether it be Adonis or whether it be Osiris, or Tammuz. Therefore, it is every possibility. Back to this book. Therefore, that there is every possibility, therefore, that the Tammuz ritual might have been attached to a harvest god of pre-Hellenistic Greeks, who received at the same time the new name of Adonis. Osiris of Egypt resembles Tammuz, but his Mesopotamian origin has not been proved. It would appear probable that Tammuz, Attis, Osiris, and the deities represented by Adonis and Diarmid were all developed from an archaic god of fertility and vegetation. The central figure of a myth was not only as ancient as the knowledge and practice of agriculture, but had existence even in the hunting period. Traces of Tammuz, Osiris story in various forms are found all over the area occupied by the Mediterranean, or brown races from Sumeria to the British Isles. Remember, this was written in the 1910s. Apparently, the original myth was connected with the tree and water worship and the worship of animals. Adonis sprang from the tree. The body of Osiris was concealed in a tree which grew around the sea-drifted chest in which he was concealed. Diarmid concealed himself in a tree when pursued by Finn. The blood of Tammuz, Osiris, and Adonis reddened the swollen rivers which fertilized the soil. Various animals were associated with the harvest god, who appears to have been manifested from time to time in different forms. From this spirit pervaded all nature. In Egypt, the soul of Osiris entered the Apis bull, or the ram of Mendes. I was just talking about Baphomet. Tammuz in the hymns is called the preeminent steer of heaven, and the popular sacrifice was of a white kid of the god Tammuz, which, however, might be substituted by a suckling pig. Osiris also had associations with the swine, and the Egyptians, according to Herodotus, sacrificed a pig to him annually when set at a full moon. Hunted the boar in the delta marshes. He probably hunted the boar form of Osiris, whose human body had been recovered from the sacred tree by Isis, as the soul of Bata. The hero of the Egyptian folktale migrated from the blossom of the bull and the bull to the tree, so apparently did the soul of Osiris pass from incarnation to incarnation. Set, the demon slayer of the harvester god, and also a boar form, he was the black pig who devoured the waning moon and blinded the eye of Ra. It's fucking heavy metal. In his character as long-lived patriarch, Tammuz, the king Dionos of Berosus, reigned in Babylonia for 36,000 years. When he died, he departed to Hades, or the abyss. Osiris, after reigning over the Egyptians, became the judge of the dead. Tammuz of the Sumerian hymns, however, is like the Adonis-like god who lived on earth for part of the year as the shepherd and agriculturalist so dearly beloved by the goddess Ishtar. Then he died so that he might depart to the realm of Ereshkigal, who was Persephone, queen of Hades. According to one account, his death was caused by the fickle Ishtar when the goddess wooed Gilgamesh, the Babylonian Hercules. He upbraided her, saying, "On Tammuz, the spouse of thy youth, thou didst lay affliction every year." References in the Sumerian hymns suggest that there has also existed a form of the legend which gave account of the slaying of the young god by someone else other than Ishtar. The slayer may have been a Set-like demon, perhaps Nin Sech, who appears to have symbolized the destroying influence of the sun. He was a war deity, and his name, Professor Pinches. That sounds like a dirty clown. Oh my God, Professor Pinches. That's fucking, I gotta write that down. That's hilarious. I'm gonna fucking use that. Is conjectured to mean the Lord of the Wild Boar. There is no direct evidence, however, to connect Tammuz's slayer with the boar which killed Adonis. Ishtar's innocence is emphasized by the fact that she mourned for her youthful lover, crying, "O hero, my lord, O me! I will say, food I eat not, water I drink not, because of the exalted one of the nether world. Him of the radiant face, yea, radiant of the exalted one of the nether world. Him of the dove-like voice, yea, dove-like. Tammuz, Tammuz died with the dying vegetation, and Diarmid, remember that's the German dude, expired when the hills apparently were assuming their purple tints. The month of Tammuz wailings was from 20th June to 20th July. Hey, we're, at the time of this recording, are in the time of wailings, when the heat and dryness brought forth the demons of pestilence. The mourners chanted, he has gone to the bosom of the earth, and the dead are numerous in the land. Men are filled with sorrow, they stagger by day in gloom. In the month of the year which bring not peace hast thou gone, and hast thou gone on a journey that makes an end of thy people. From the extract contains a reference to the slaying of the god, the Holy One of Ishtar. In the middle of the year the fields languish, the shepherds, the wise one, the man of sorrows. Why have they slain? In his temple, in his inhabited domain, the child Lord of knowledge abides no more. In the meadows, verily, verily, the soul of life perishes. There is wailing for Tammuz, and at the sacred cedar where the mother bore thee, a reference which connects the god like Adonis and Osiris with tree worship. Also crucifixion. The wailing is of the herbs of the first lament is, they are not produced. The wailing is for the grain. Ears are not produced. The wailing is for habitation for the flocks which bring forth no more. The wailing is for the perishing wedded ones. For the perishing children, the dark-headed people create no more. The wailing is also for the shrunken river, the parched meadows and the fish pools. The cane breaks the forest, the plains, the gardens of the palace, which all suffer because the god of fertility has departed. And the mourner cries, how long shall the springs of Vidyor be restrained? How long shall the putting forth of leaves be held back? Whither went Tammuz? His destination has already been referred to as the bosom of the earth. In the Syrian version of the descent of Ishtar, he dwells in the houses of darkness among the dead, where dust in the nourishment and in their food mud. Yet the light is never seen. The gloomy Babylonian Hades is one of the Sumerian hymns. However, it is stated that Tammuz upon the flood was cast out. And the reference may be to the submarine, the house of Ea, and the blessed island to which the Babylonian Noah was carried to this Hades, bloomed the nether garden of Adonis. And I'll tell you what, bros, this is a great place to take a fucking break. I'm thirsty, yo. I'm thirsty. Do, 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 do. All right. So where were we at? Oh, Tammuz was going to Hades. The following extract refers to the garden of Damu. Damu, his youth therein slumbers. Among the garden flowers he slumbers. Among the garden flowers he is cast away. Among the tamarisks he slumbers with woe. He causes us to be sedated. Although Tammuz of the hymns was slain, he returned again from Hades. Apparently, he came back as a child. Whoa, this is Harpocrates, which makes sense because Harpocrates was an aspect of Osiris. It's all clicking. I'm making connections, guys. He is wailed for us, child, Lord Gishzida, as well as my hero Damu. In his lunar character, the Egyptian Osiris appeared each month as the child, surpassingly beautiful. The Osiris bull was also a child of the moon. This is when you get the bull with the disc in between its horns. I know you guys have seen that shit. When the bull of Attis was sacrificed by his worshippers, it was were drenched with its blood and were afterwards ceremoniously fed with its milk. And they were supposed to have renewed their youth and became children. The ancient Greek god Eros was represented as a wanton boy or a handsome youth, another god of fertility. The Irish Angus, who resembles Eros, is called the Ever Young, and he slumbers like Tammuz and awakes in the spring. This bit about them killing this bull, the Apis, and it says they were ceremoniously covered in his blood. They used to slaughter them. They used to build, like a trench. You know, like when they work on your fucking car, you pull your car over this trench. And they're standing up down there, like, doing their grease monkey thing. They used to build these things, and they would walk the bull over them. And they would slaughter the bull, and the blood would pour out of the animal, powered by gravity, and just drench all over you. It's wild, son. Apparently, it was believed the child god Tammuz returned from earlier Sumerian paradise of the deep and grew into full manhood in a comparatively brief period. And Vyas and other supermen of Indian mythology, a couplet from Tammuz hymn says tersely, "In his infancy in a sunken boat he lay, in his manhood in the submerged grain he lay." The boat may be the chest in which Adonis was concealed by Aphrodite, which she confided him in the care of Persephone, the queen of Hades, who desired to retain the young god, but was compelled by Zeus to send him back to the goddess of love and vegetation. The fact that Ishtar descended to Hades in a quest for Tammuz may perhaps explain the symbolic reference in hymns to the mother goddess, being a sunken boats also with their powers were in abeyance. As here we're going to come across another Crowley character. I should say another Egyptian character that Crowley uses. Those for the god part of each year. It is possible, too, that the boat had a lunar and solar significance. Khonsu, the Egyptian moon god, for instance, was associated with the spring sun, being a deity of fertility and therefore a corn spirit. He was a form of Osiris, the patriarch who sojourned on earth to teach mankind how to grow corn and cultivate fruit trees. In the Egyptian legend, Osiris received the corn seeds from Isis, which suggests that among the great mother-worshipping peoples, it was believed that agricultural civilization had a female origin. The same myths may have been attached to corn gods or corn goddesses associated with water, sun, moon, and stars. The goddess Ishtar visited Hades to search for the lover of her youth. As part of this form of the legend survives in the famous Assyrian hymn known as The Descent of Ishtar. It was first translated by a late Mr. George Smith of the British Museum, a box containing inscribed tablets, and has been sent from Assyria to London. Mr. Smith was characteristic patience and skill, arranged and deciphered them, giving to the world a fragment of ancient literature infused with much sublimity and imaginative power. Ishtar is depicted descending into dismal Hades, where the souls of the dead exist in bird forms. When the goddess reaches the gate of Hades, she cries to the porter, "Keeper of the waters, open thy gate that I may enter. If thou openest not the gate that I may enter, I will strike the door, the bolts I will shatter. I will strike the threshold and will pass through the doors. I will raise up the dead to devour the living. Above the living, the dead shall exceed in numbers." It's Thanos! The porter lets her in, but he strips her of all of her clothes and her crown and her jewelry at each gate. And as Ishtar enters through the various gates, she, like I said, was stripped of her ornaments and her clothing. And at the first gate, her crown was taken off. At the second, her earrings, blah, blah, blah. At the sixth, her bracelets of her hands and feet. And at the seventh, the covering robe of her body. And Ishtar asked at each gate, "Why is thus dealt with?" And the porter answers, "Such is the command of Alitu." Alitu is Persephone. We switched names. After descending for a prolonged period, the Queen of Heaven at length stands naked before the Queen of Hades. Ishtar is proud and arrogant, and Alitu, desiring to punish her rival, whom she cannot humble, commands the plague demon Namatar to strike her with disease in all the parts of her body. The effect of Ishtar's fate was disastrous upon the earth. Growth and fertility came to an end. And then this messenger of the higher gods, Zeus or Anu, whichever, shows up, and he's like, "Yo, bitch, chill." And so she was compelled to obey the high gods and addresses Namatar, saying, "Unto Ishtar give the waters of life and bring her before me." Therefore, the Queen of Heaven was conducted through the various gates, and at each she received her robes and her ornaments, which were taken from her upon entering. And this plague demon, Namatar, says, "Since thou hast not paid a ransom for thy deliverance to her, so to her again turn back. For Tammuz, the husband of thy youth, The glistening waters of life pour over him. In splendid clothing dress him. In a ring of crystal adorn him. And Ishtar mourns for the wounded Tammuz, smiting her breast. You know, there's a shortage of perfect breasts in this world. And she did not ask for the precious eye stones from her amulets, which were apparently to ransom Tammuz. The poem concludes with Ishtar's wail. O my only brother Tammuz, thou dost not lament for me. In that day that Tammuz adorned me with a ring of crystal, with a bracelet of emeralds, together with himself he adorned me. And with himself he adorned me. Many men mourners and women mourners on a bier place him and assemble in the wake. So this poem ends pretty abruptly, which has some academic and scholarly ramifications, as we're going to find out. It ends before he rises from the grave. Before he does that number 2 that you need for a dying and resurrecting God story. The Sumerian hymn of Tammuz, Ishtar descends to Hades and Tammuz refuses or is unable to return with her. Quote, his spouse unto her abode he sent back, unquote. And in another hymn, Tammuz only promises to return. He says, I will go up. As for me, I will depart with thee. I will return unto my mother. Let us go back. So I'm just going to stop and ask this question of you guys right now. Is Tammuz a dying and rising proto-Christ figure? The episode's not done. I still have more information, but I wanted to stop and just ask you that now. What do you think? What do you think that Tammuz was a dying and rising proto-Christ figure? So now we're going to go to this book called The Golden Bough by Sir James George Frazer. This was written in 1922, and this book is ginormous. It's huge. It's got every one of these rising and dying god figures in it. So Frazer here in The Golden Bough, 1922, he says, but when Persephone opened the chest and beheld the beauty of the babe, she refused to give him back to Aphrodite. So in this case, Persephone, remember, is the queen of Hades and Aphrodite is the queen of heaven. As it relates to the poem that we just read parts of. Although the goddess of love went down herself to hell to ransom her dear one from the power of the grave, the dispute between the two goddesses of love and death was settled by Zeus, who decreed that Adonis should abide with Persephone in the underworld for one part of the year, and with Aphrodite in the upper world for another part of the year. At last the fair youth was killed in hunting a wild boar, or by the jealous Ares, who turned himself into the likeness of a boar in order to compass the death of his rival. Bitterly did Aphrodite lament her loved and lost Adonis. In this form of the myth, the contest between Aphrodite and Persephone for the possession of Adonis clearly reflects the struggle between Ishtar and Allatu and the land of the dead, while the decision of Zeus and Adonis is to spend one part of the year underground and the other part of the year above ground is merely a Greek version of the annual disappearance and reappearance of Tammuz. So again, I have to ask. Okay, is it Lent? Is it Easter? Is Tammuz a proto-Christ figure? I'm not sure. We're going to go back to Douglas Mackenzie's The Myths of Babylon and Assyria. This was written in 1915. References have been made to the introduction of Tammuz worship into Jerusalem. Ishtar, as a queen of heaven, was also adorned with the backsliding Israelites as a deity of battle and harvest. When Jeremiah censured the people for burning incense and serving gods whom they knew not, he served neither he said, neither they, ye, nor your fathers, they made answer, since we left off to burn incense to the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings unto her. We have wanted all things, and all have been consumed by the sword and by famine. The women took the leading part in these practices, but refused to accept all the blame, saying, when we burned incense to the Queen of Heaven, and poured out drink offerings unto her, did we make our cakes and pour out drink offerings unto her without our men? And the husbands and the children's even assisted in the ceremony is made evident in another reference to goddess worship. The children gather wood and their fathers kindle fire, and the women knead the dough to make the cakes to the Queen of Heaven. Jastrow, who is a scholar that has written about this, suggests that the women of Israel wept for Tammuz, offered cakes to the mother goddess, because all religious bodies, women represent the conservative element. Among them, religious customs continue practices after they have been abandoned by men. The evidence of Jeremiah, however, shows that men certainly cooperated with the archaic ceremonials in lighting the fires with the vital spark. They apparently acted in imitation of the god of fertility. The women, on the other hand, represented the reproductive harvest goddess in providing the food supply. In recognition for her gift, they were rewarded the goddess by offering her cakes and prepared the newly ground wheat and barley, the first fruits of the harvest. As the corn god came as a child, the children began the ceremony by gathering the wood for the sacred fire. When the women mourned for Tammuz, they did so evidently because the death of the god was lamented by the goddess Ishtar. It would appear, therefore, the suggestion regarding this conservative element should really apply to all immemorial practices of folk religion. These differed from refined ceremonies to the official cult of Babylonia. They were suitable temples that organized bands of priests and priestesses, but the official cult received no recognition in Palestine. The cakes intended for the goddess were not offered up in the temple for Abraham's God, but quote, in the streets of Jerusalem and in other cities. So I ask again, is Tammuz one of these dying and rising pre-Christ figures? I'm not sure. I don't know how to answer it, because to me it doesn't seem like he rose. There's not a tradition of him being risen. You know, we know after Jesus died and was resurrected, we know what he did. He wandered around, said hi to a couple friends, and was like, drop the mic. So I found an interesting epilogue to this. And here it goes. This is right from Wikipedia. The late 19th century Scottish anthropologist George Frazer, Sir James George Frazer, which is the dude he's the guy that wrote the Golden Bough that we were just talking about, wrote extensively about Tammuz in his monumental study of comparative religion, the Golden Bough. As well as later works. Frazer claimed that Tammuz was just one example of this archetype of the dying and rising god, found throughout all cultures. Frazer's main intention was to prove that all religions were fundamentally the same. This is the crux of that beginning of the Zeitgeist movie. So keep that in mind. Frazer's main intention was to... Oh, wait, I just read that. And that all essential features of Christianity could be found in earlier religions. Frazer's arguments were criticized as sloppy and amateurish from the beginning, but his claim, remember, this is in 1890 was the first publishing of this book. But his claims became widely influential in late 19th and early 20th century scholarship of religion. Tammuz's categorization as a dying and rising god was based on an abbreviated Akkadian redaction of Iana's descent into the underworld, which is, she's the same character as Ishtar. Yeah. Which was missing the ending. Since numerous lamentations over the death of Demuzid, this is yet another name for Tammuz, has already been translated, scholars filled in the missing ending by assuming that the reason for Ishtar's descent was because she was going to resurrect Demuzid, and that the text could therefore be assumed to end with Tammuz's resurrection. Then in the middle of the 20th century, the complete unabridged original Sumerian text of Iana's descent was finally translated, revealing that instead of ending with Demuz's resurrection as long had been assumed, the text actually ends with Demuz's death. The discovery of the returned Tammuz in 1963 briefly revived hope that Tammuz might once again be able to be categorized as a dying and rising god, but the text ultimately proved disappointing in this regard because it does not describe a triumph over death, as would be necessary for a true Frazerian resurrection myth. And instead does precisely the opposite and affirm that, quote, inalterable power of the realm of the dead, unquote, by the fact that Tammuz could only leave the underworld when his sister takes his place. Frazer and the others also saw Tammuz's Greek equivalent Adonis as the dying and rising god, despite the fact that he is never described as rising from the dead in any extant Greco-Roman writings, and his only possible allusions to the supposed resurrection came from late, highly ambiguous statements made by Christian authors. Around the same time the notion of Tammuz as a, quote, dying and rising god, unquote, became discredited, scholars began to severely criticize the designation of the, quote, dying and rising god, unquote, altogether. In 1987, Jonathan Z. Smith concluded in America Iliad's Encyclopedia of Religion that the category of dying and rising gods, once a major topic of scholarly investigation, must now be understood to have been largely a misnomer based on an imaginative reconstruction that exceedingly late or highly ambiguous texts. He further argued that the deities previously referred to as the dying and rising would be better termed as the dying gods and the disappearing gods, asserting that before Christianity the two categories were distinct and no gods who died did not return, and those who returned never truly died. By the end of the 20th century, most scholars had come to agree that the notion of dying and rising gods was an invention, and that the term was not useful scholarly designation. Like I said, that's from Wikipedia. So, what do you guys think about this? Is it mutually exclusive? Can the story of Easter and Lent, the limitation, the women who weep for Tammuz, be linked, and him not being a proto-Christ figure? Or, I mean, no one talks about this shit, but like, what about this? What if originally the Gospels don't mention Jesus rising from the tomb? What if that's a late addition? I would actually put my money on that. God, now I got a fucking whole other topic to do. All right, this is the Abercast. Rate and review on iTunes, please. Let me know what you think about this. I'd like to hear you guys weigh in on this, and if you even give a shit about these rising gods. On the horizon, I am going to tell you that there is going to be a topic about the 16 crucified gods of our ancient history, and that's a super interesting topic. So this kind of lets us dip our toes in on that. Yeah, I got a lot of good stuff coming up. We're going to actually do we did the Lesser Key of Solomon a few months ago. We're actually going to do the Key of Solomon. We're going to do that. I got this thing about the goddess Columbia, the American goddess, is going to be coming up. I got a bunch of good stuff coming up. Kenneth Grant, we're going to be starting a thing on Kenneth Grant. We're going to be doing Jack Parsons, Liber 49, and the Babylon Working. We're going to be doing that. We got tons of great stuff coming up. So I hope you guys are digging the show. Let me know what you think. And be on the lookout for all this fucking great stuff I got coming up. Rate and review on iTunes. Check out the website. Find me on the social media and hook me up there. Go to the Abercast Facebook page. I'm trying to be more engaging on that. And, yeah. And remember, if you don't date trans women, it's not that you don't like hooking up with dudes. It's that you're homophobic, so you're transphobic. Jeez. Okay, so we're going to end the show right now. But remember, if you stay until after the Soda Jerk's done, I'm going to tack that 34 minutes of Those Who Weep for Tammuz on, so you can catch that. Remember, this part was done before that part, and I haven't listened back to that part, so there might be some, static. There might be some static. I'm going to go get my pool. I'm going to fucking make some taco salad and fucking get in a pool and just pour gin down my face for the rest of the night.
Stigmata Studios presents The Scorpion Strikes. In this comic book, a terrorist called the Scorpion is transported to a secret CIA prison. He quickly turns the tables on the guards and administrators and releases the prisoners. A well-armed anarchist called Constituent Zero assembles a team and fights to take the prison back. This story is a dark political action thriller. The Scorpion's actions set the stage perfectly for the Jin Jihad. Available on Indie Planet. Get more info on The Scorpion Strikes, the Jin Jihad, and other titles at stigmatastudios.com. Stigmata Studios presents The Test of the Scorpion. In this comic book, while the Jin Jihad is raging on one side of the city, the terrorist called the Scorpion sets a secondary attack in motion as he obtains a small tactical nuclear bomb. A mysterious, ever-living warrior called Cyrus the Dead Guy steps forward to test the faith of the Scorpion and his lunatic followers. This is an action-adventure story. It's a bit of swashbuckler that wraps up the Jihad stories. Available on Indie Planet. Get more info on The Scorpion Strikes, the Jin Jihad, The Test of the Scorpion, and other titles at stigmatastudios.com.
Tightened up her grip and she made me sick that night. I knew that the when the crack of dawn is safe. So I take a shot of whiskey and say, good night. The whiskey make me wanna fuck and fight. I fuck and fight, fuck and fight. The whiskey make me wanna fuck and fight. The whiskey make me wanna fuck and fight. The whiskey make me wanna fuck and fight.
Last week we talked about the Branch Davidian massacre there out in Waco in the 90s. This week we're going to get a little weepy. So what I want you to do is I want you to pour yourself a gin jihad and settle in. Maybe light a cigar to get some ashes ready and pour some out for your dead homie Tammuz. This episode we're going to be talking about the secret origins of Lent. Where's my... Click the button. All right, so we're going to talk, like I said, a little bit about Ash Wednesday and the secret origin of Lent. We're going to talk about this guy named Tammuz, and we're going to be talking about the women who weep for Tammuz. I'm always the guy every year that that randomly some Wednesday out of the year I stumble. I stumble out of the studio and run into somebody that had been to the Ash Wednesday mash, and I'm always like, "Hey, you got a little schmutza on your forehead there," because I never remember it. I'm like, "You dork, you got a little smudge on your forehead." All right, so it's Ash Wednesday. Well, it was Ash Wednesday. I couldn't get the timing to line up perfectly, so we're like a week behind. But it is still during Lent, so I was raised by, before we get into this, let's do some trigger warnings for you millennials out there. We're going to be talking a little bit about Catholics and reappropriation of pagan rituals. Yeah, so that's about it. Not too aggressively, not too aggressive this week, I guess. I was raised by a non-practicing Catholic. My dad was a non-practicing Catholic, and my mom was over-practicing Southern Baptist. So Ash Wednesday and Lent and all these feast days around this time of the year, it was always kind of weird to me. You know, when you ask a Baptist, what's the Ash Wednesday all about? They're like, why do these guys have smudges all over their heads? You know, the Baptist will tell you, well, it's this extra biblical thing, and there's nothing in the Bible that mandates this or Lent, you know, or even the ritual fasting, giving shit up, you know. But when you ask a Catholic about it, they got a lot to say. So a lot of this story comes from Oriental mythology, the Masks of God by Uncle Joe Campbell. And the Bible actually has one passage that deals with those who weep for Tammuz. I'm going to get into that in a little bit. But the official story for Ash Wednesday, here it is. Let's get down to the nitty gritty. If I were to ask the Pope, maybe not this Pope, because he doesn't seem to be quite the same kind of Pope as the other popes. But if I were to ask somebody over there what Ash Wednesday is about, they would say that Ash Wednesday is a day of fasting, and it marks the first day of Lent. And you say, okay, well, what's Lent? And they say Lent is the 46 days before Easter. Now, a lot of people were like, what? I thought it was 40 days. And you got to kind of get into the semantics of it. You know, nothing's ever easy. There has to be some kind of mathematical equation with all this stuff. So when they talk about the 46 days, Lent really is 40 days of fasting and observance. But they take out all the Sundays. So they minus the 6 Sundays before Easter. So it's literally 46 days, but they're only doing shit on 40 of them. On the 6th day, they got to go to church, I guess, or whatever. And this is going to tie into the movable feast stuff, which I think is fascinating. That'll come towards the end of the thing. So Matthew, Mark, and Luke, these are the gospels that all agree with each other. John is out there. It's got another word for it. I can't remember what it's called, but it's the one gospel that kind of disagrees with these other gospels in a lot of ways. But these three gospels say that Jesus fasted in the desert for 40 days, and this is when he was tempted by Satan. Tempted by Satan. Lent is a ritual time designed to mirror this 40 days that Jesus spent in the desert, being tempted and fasting. This is the 40 days. And it's also time to prep for Easter. The idea is like you're fasting. Nowadays, it's not fasting. Nowadays, you just give up McDonald's or something for 40 days or fucking milkshakes so they don't bring all the boys to the yard, or chocolate, or smoking, or drinking, whatever. But I guess like back in the old days, it was like fasting. Like you can only have like bread or water. And the idea is like somehow getting back to basics brings you closer to God, like that old Nine Inch Nails song. Ash Wednesday. Okay, so nowhere in the Bible does it say to make a cross on your forehead of ashes. The closest we can find, for a mandate like that is they're supposed to be used from the palm branches blessed from the previous year's Palm Sunday. And in Genesis 3:19, there's this, the ashes to ashes, dust to dust, or the way that we said it before was, remember, you are dust, and to dust shall you return. Now, meanwhile, let's just not examine this ritual too closely, because if they're pointing towards an Old Testament thing for this, there were no crosses in the Old Testament. Crosses didn't mean anything to those guys in the Old Testament. And also, we're not made from dust, fool. We're made from clay. It says so. Clay. All right, so so it's like, don't read too far into these things, but now we're gonna waver in. We're gonna stumble into the real story here, like a drunken uncle in a minute. All right, so we're going to talk about the co-opting and rebranding of pagan rituals and stories. So in the Bible, I mentioned that Tammuz makes an appearance in the Bible. Actually, he doesn't, but the women that weep for him do. In the book, Ezekiel 8:14-15. Then he brought me to the gate of the Lord's house, which was towards the north, and behold, there sat women weeping for Tammuz. Then said unto me, Hast thou seen this, O son of man? Turn thee yet again, and thou shalt see greater abominations than these. So we're going to be talking about Tammuz and his family, and we're going to be talking about it in like two different ways. One is this ancient Sumerian kind of way, and the other is going to be in like this kind of story sort of way, and how they kind of like smash up together. So we got to go all the way back to Mesopotamia, and we find, like, it's common knowledge, and like if you guys caught my talks over at the Ninth Story, especially I think 2 Christmases ago, we did a Christmas episode where I kind of went into all these different pre-Christ figures that were in history before Jesus rolled around. So I'm not going to belabor the point. You could look these up and see there's like a ton of these myths and pre-Christ figures that are out there that share a lot of the Dionysian attributes as Jesus does. So we're going to go back to Mesopotamia, and in Mesopotamia, in this Mesopotamian myth, is early, super early, like one of the first civilizations ever. Early myth. There's Nimrod, who's the dad, and there's Syriamus, who's the mom, and they have a child called Tammuz. And Tammuz was a god. This was an immaculate conception. He was a shepherd god. All sorts of, like I said, all sorts of links to Jesus. And he was killed by a wild boar. Now I'm just going to tell you something. I'm going to take a little aside here. And you're like, he was killed by a wild boar? What the fuck is that all about? But I need to tell you guys, I used to live in Germany when I was in the army, and I've seen wild boars, and they're fucking terrifying, and they're huge. So I remember I was like in a perimeter once, just like guarding something, and these trees started shaking, and this boar popped out, bam! And it was like a little boar, and I was like, oh wow, look, it's like a little boar piglet or something. And then like another one popped out, and there was like 3 or 4 of them, and then the whole like hedgerow started shaking, and out comes the mama boar. It was like gigantic. It was like the size of a fucking hot water tank fucking running past me. It was terrifying. Yeah, so mad props to, messiahs can get killed by boars. That makes total sense to me. So after he was killed by this boar, a whole month was dedicated to lamenting this god's passing. And he turns out to be one of these life, death, rebirth gods. Is a allegory or an analogy of time passing through the year, and you'll see this like over and over and over again. But the main point here that we need to talk about is the whole month dedicated to lamenting this god's passing. And the so just to reiterate, dad is Nimrod, mom is Syriamus, and the kid is Tammuz. And Nimrod passes. He becomes the sky/sun god, and Syriamus becomes Nimrod passes and becomes Marduk, who is the sun/sky god, and Syriamus becomes Esther or Ishtar, the moon goddess. And the moon goddess part is the part that's going to get real important here in a minute. And Tammuz is this. It's literally the sun. Like, he's literally the one that's living, being born, living, dying, and being reborn to mark the seasons and whatnot. So this month of lamenting goes deep. Actually, the Hebrews have a month named Tammuz, and it's weird. It's actually in the Gregorian analog of June and July, their month of lamenting, but they fast. They refrain from wine and meat. It has to do with the time the Jerusalem's wall fell, or Jerusalem's walls were breached, to the time of the destruction of the Second Temple. It also is the month of the sin of the golden calf during the Exodus. That's the one where Moses went crazy, and he was like, "Oh, you guys praying to that golden cow? Hold up, yo!" And he had the cow like busted down into like particles, and he made people like drink the particles of the golden idol, and then they were all killed, and their fucking family was killed, and their fucking dogs were killed. So all these things took place in this month of lamentation. The month of lamentation. All right, so Nimrod's the sun god, Syriamus is the moon goddess, and there, like I said, there was an immaculate conception, and they had this baby named Tammuz. So, because Nimrod died, Syriamus and Tammuz were left, and there's a lot of Sumerian artwork that you could see. There's like these bas reliefs, and there's like these statues and stuff where it's where Syriamus or Esther or Ishtar becomes the heavenly queen. And there's a lot of imagery where she's holding onto this baby, and it's like you could totally see where this could be like a proto Mother Mary and Jesus, like the proto version of this, like this is the alpha or the beta copy. I'm sorry about that. Okay, so so if you take that path, like if we get there and if we're going to accept the idea that this is like that is the passage from Ezekiel actually becomes kind of prophetic, talking about this idolatry between the people and the abomination of these women who still weep for Tammuz in church. You know, you're like, well, what does this all have to do with Lent? You know, I'm trying to make the point of the month of lamentation, the mourning, the mourning for this Tammuz cat before he comes back to life, and tie it into the idea of like it's instead it's mapping onto this idea of Jesus spending 40 days and 40 nights or whatever, 46 days in the desert being tempted by the Satan. And I'm going to tie it together with this. This is we're going to take another break here because I got to get this thing. I got to fix whatever's going on. But I'm going to take a quick break, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to explain what it's important with this Samiris, Estar or Ishtar becoming the moon goddess, and it dictating where the Lent falls, and like where Easter falls, where all these movable feast dates fall for us today. Is it's all predicated on her being this moon goddess? And I'll be right back, and we're going to talk about it. Okay, hold on. All right, I got my shit together. Okay, so on top of that, that's the Mesopotamian sort of myth-y part of this family of gods and goddesses. Now, there's also a lot of work tying this stuff into our Old Testament, where Nimrod is mentioned as the god the guy who was creating the Tower of Babel. So he's the king that's reigning over this building of the Tower of Babel, and this is in the Ages book. It's touched upon, not the Tammuz stuff, but the Nimrod and the system of debt slavery that he kind of creates in order to construct this Tower of Babel. So, like, I'm sure you guys know the story. This guy's building the Tower of Babel, and he wants to build it up to, the allegory is he wants to build it up to heaven, because he wants to prove that he's like greater than God. And this is like this is post flood, so this is like after the flood, God kind of went away for a little while, it seems like, from civilization. So this guy's like, I'm the new fucking God, and he's trying to build this tower, getting up there, and eventually the angels come down and they're like, yo, stop building this shit. This whole what you guys are doing over here building this tower is a affront to God. Like, you guys are showing too much pride, and you guys are getting too close, I guess. Maybe there's a scare there. But in order to, the idea is like, the flood was supposed to get rid of everybody, right? Obviously, it was a gigantic failure because people were still around. You know, even if, like, the idea was like, well, if I just save, like, one righteous family, then everyone after that will be cool. God's always fucking this kind of stuff up in the Bible, and he's always wrong. So as we see, like, no, if you believe that, or if we believe that other folks besides Noah and his crew made it, you know, the idea that like all his offspring will be righteous, I mean, it's fucked up, like, from the bat almost, like, even as the floodwaters are receding. Anyhow, I'm not to get too far off the topic. We're talking about this Tower of Babel thing. So this Tower of Babel's filled with these men, and the guy who leads them is kind of like taking his place, like, building this tower up because, like in this Mesopotamian myth, Nimrod's the fucking sun god, so he needs to get up there. And the angels come down and they're like, yo, slow your roll and start taking this shit down right now. And what happens is because the flood couldn't kill all these prideful, shameful, whatever, disobedient humans. In order to turn them on themselves, they do this curse of Babel, where the population is fractured, and it's fractured using how they can communicate. So it's like these got like I don't know what the math is. I'm sure there's some kind of Kabbalistic study of this or theory about it. I'm not familiar with it right now in my brain. But like a fraction of the population of this tower can now speak Chinese only, and a fraction of them can only speak Palestinian, and a fraction of them can only speak Pashtun or German or whatever. So the idea is, this is like this is the beginning of culture war. Like we're gonna split them up, we're gonna fucking divide them, and eventually they're all gonna kill each other. It's all because this guy was like, I'm trying to get to heaven because I'm trying to be God, yo. So I find it interesting that you find these God, goddess, or Holy Spirit and Son. You know, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, the Father, the Son, and the Moon Goddess, whatever. Is it the root of a lot of these religions and myths and stuff? And here we're seeing like where that actually could come from, like why it's common in so many places is because it started here in this Tower of Babel before it was like fractured and split off. So like these people, they just went and they just started developing these myths in their own different languages, but we get the same fucking thing all around. So I'm sure I'm not the first to posit to say this ancient Mesopotamian story might be like smeared around to all different kind of like these Eastern and Western cultures and stuff, due to like this curse of this Babel curse or whatever. Anyhow, I'm real off in the left field. And what I want to talk about before I so rudely had to go take care of this, I almost sucked this jihad down my wrong pipe, which I'm sure I'm not the first person to ever say that. All right. So everybody knows. So I'm going to talk about why the moon goddess is important to Lent. Or what I'm saying is the month of lamentation set aside for those who weep for Tammuz. Jesus' birthday every year is this fixed day. We always know it's the 25th of December is Christmas. That's when he was born in his little manger, and there was like Venus up in the sky, and the three magicians come in, and there's like all the goats and chickens and stuff are all around, and the shepherd comes in. So we know that always happens on December 25th. But so how come when he dies is this moving date? Like, it's never like April 15th, or it's never like April 20th. Well, it could be April 15th, but it's not consecutively April 15th. It could be any day. There's actually like a month and a half range where it could be. And the reason that is, and a lot of people don't even know this, is that these dates are based on the cycles of the moon. It's Easter is always the first Sunday after the full moon of the vernal equinox. So you find that date, and then you count out your 46 days for Lent, and that's always going to end on a Wednesday, and that's when your Ash Wednesday is, which sets this whole thing off. The way you figure it out is backwards, but finding that Ash Wednesday, kicking it all off, is forwards, or vice versa. Flip it around however it makes sense to your brain. So he goes in the desert Jesus was born. Okay, but the days he goes in the desert, dies, and resurrects every year is different because these are marked by what is called the movable feasts. You could see this. Movable Feasts is actually also a great book by Ernest Hemingway. Okay, so Easter is always the first Sunday after the full moon following the vernal equinox. Oh, that feels so much better. So you have like a month and a half window there where Jesus resurrects. So his birthday is always fixed. His 46 days in the desert, 40 if you count the Saturdays or the Sundays, whatever you count Sabbaths as. And then there's your Ash Wednesday, and there's your Lent, there's your time in the desert. But it always moves. It's always movable. And these other movable feasts are all spaced out according to when that full moon happens after the vernal equinox. So you're looking at it and you're like, well, what does this have to do with like Ishtar or Ister or Semiramis? And you're like, well, she's the moon goddess, bro. She's letting you know when all this stuff's going to fucking happen. And then you have that month-long, that 46 or 40 day, I always feel like I have to have an asterisk next to it, 40 or 46 day month of lament. You know, when those who weep for Tammuz can weep for him. So, I'm not sure if I made my point with this episode. I might have just strung a bunch of interesting, nonsensical things together. I feel like it's definitely something to look at, and I believe this is the secret origin to Lent, with an interesting aside about the Tower of Babel stuff. Yeah, so there it is. There's my the idea of those who weep for Tammuz and the secret origins of Lent. You can find everything that has to do with my comics at stigmatastudios.com. I want to say thank you. I'm watching the numbers just go up and up and up. And I want to say that if anyone wants to rate and review in iTunes or Amazon, I'm going to start looking at that stuff. I'll give you a shout out on the show, even if it's negative, I suppose. If you're wondering what to do after this, since the show's over, you can always go to society-13.com and find a bunch of great affiliated shows. We have shows ranging from topics from adult entertainment to prog rock to just dramatic storytelling. We got shit over there for everybody. If you're looking for some raunchy reviews from a bunch of hot ass chicks, you can go to Queens of NC-17 and check those guys out. I also do some production work for that show. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, at Stigmata Studios. You can find me on Twitter at Stigmata Studios. You can find me on Twitter also. My personal thing is JONNYAXX. On Facebook, there's also an Abercast Facebook page you can go to. Check that out. And there's also a link to the newsletter. Newsletter fires randomly and rarely nowadays. So, I'm thinking about getting like a virtual assistant to help me with that stuff. But whatever. So if you just want to keep up to date, there you go. Definitely whenever new book releases, it's there. So yeah, there you go. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you found this at least entertaining, if not informative. And if anyone asks you, "Hey, what is it with all these people that walk around with these smudges on their fucking foreheads? What's that all about?" You can now go, "Young man, this is about a dude named Tammuz, and pour your fucking 40s out for this guy because we're lamenting him." Thank you guys.